The landscape for communicating CER information from a pharmaceutical or industry perspective is really evolving. I mean, things are changing very dramatically. In the past, you're probably familiar with the fact that there were relatively few providers of information to healthcare providers. The pharmaceutical industry was one of those key providers traditionally. Much of what we provided went through regulatory channels, so what we could say was fairly restricted, and the labels that were provided by the FDA really kept us in line with regards to the information we could provide, which is reasonable. But these days things are changing. There are a lot of resources providing information to healthcare providers and to patients, and sometimes both directly. And I think the challenge is that the rigor in which some of that data is generated, the standards that have been applied or not, vary significantly. The pharmaceutical industry is held to a very strict standard for both creating evidence and disseminating information. That's not necessarily the case for many other providers of information. So I think we're in a position where things are changing, and I think we have to consider whether standards need to be applied across all of the community of informants. There are limitations within the pharmaceutical industry as far as conveying information, because we have to really meet very strict regulatory standards. And that's challenging when, in fact, so much more information is coming into the marketplace about our products, about the use of our products, and that information may actually be counter to some very good data that was generated. And even if it is good data generated by standards, we may be constrained from commenting or even using it. So if independent researchers find that the data we've generated within our NDAs or post-marketing and phase 4 work may or may not be in labeling, or at least is in the public sector, even if it is consistent with that or shows some benefit, we're really restricted in our ability to use that information. And similarly, we're restricted in the ability to challenge information that is generated and goes counter to what information we have. I mean, there are ways of doing that, and we do pursue that, but it's not easy. It's not as easy for us. So there are more restrictions and more hurdles that we have to overcome than other sources of information do. We do try to go through certain channels. For instance, in the medical organization within industry, and certainly for Pfizer, we can pursue in a peer-reviewed journal commentary, opinion. So we do that. That, of course, gets to a limited audience, but it's important to get that information out. We can go to regulators and discuss the information and some concerns that we have, if in fact there's a way of getting information into communication vehicles that we have questions about. So I think there are ways of dealing with it, but unfortunately there's so many sources of information. Physicians are using more and more online information, or information available online. Patients are using information available online. Where that information comes from is variable. The quality of the information, the standards that were used to generate it, the methodological rigor that was applied to the generation of that data, all that is often not known. So people are using that information, making decisions about the information, potentially impacting the outcomes of patients, and that's challenging for us. It's very challenging. I think everybody has in mind that we want to get information out that helps providers care for their patients better. So I think we can do that. I don't think it requires, for instance, an increase in regulation. What it requires is an acceptance of some standards that can be applied to the interpretation of data, how that data is generated, and how the data is likely to be used. Transparency, for instance, in who's providing the information, and again, the rigor that was applied to generating that information. I think we can all agree on that.